Seattle, a city of wealth, innovation, and breathtaking beauty, but beneath the luxury high-rises lies a darker reality, a city grappling with homelessness, crime, and stark inequality.
Don't shoot nobody in front of me.
How did Seattle, home to billion-dollar tech giants, become a battleground for survival and desperation? From the infamous Skid Road of the past to today's crime-ridden streets, the city's contrasts are shocking. Is this just economic imbalance, or is there something more sinister at play? Welcome to NVL Travel Documentary, where we uncover hidden truths, country facts, and real-life mysteries. Join us as we explore the crime and contrast shaping Seattle today. Are you ready?
You sure? I haven't seen you in like a while.
Number 1. Seattle, a city of contrasts, wealth and homelessness collide. Deep blue waters of Puget Sound, lush evergreen forests, and the towering peaks of the Cascade and Olympic Mountains, it offers some of the most stunning landscapes in the Pacific Northwest. Visitors are drawn not only to its natural splendor, but also to its thriving economy, driven by global giants such as Amazon, Microsoft, and Boeing. Technology startups flourish here, and the city is a hub for innovation, coffee culture, and progressive ideals. Yet beneath this prosperous metropolis lies a stark and unsettling reality. Seattle faces one of the most severe homelessness crises in the United States. Walking through downtown, one cannot ignore the sharp contrast. On one side, luxury high-rise buildings and upscale cafes buzz with activity. On the other, makeshift tent encampments line sidewalks, underpasses, and public spaces. The disparity is striking, a city of wealth overshadowed by an urgent humanitarian crisis. Why does a wealthy city like Seattle struggle so profoundly with homelessness? The answers are complex, but rooted in several key factors. First, the cost of living has skyrocketed in recent years, making housing unaffordable for many. Over the past 10 years, rental prices in Seattle have increased by nearly 70%, far outpacing wage growth. A one-bedroom apartment now costs more than $2,000 per month on average, pushing even middle-class residents to the brink of financial hardship. Second, the city faces significant challenges in addressing mental health and substance abuse issues, which disproportionately affect the homeless population. The opioid epidemic has hit Seattle hard, with fentanyl overdoses surging over the past 5 years. Many individuals experiencing homelessness also suffer from untreated mental health conditions, creating a cycle that is difficult to break without comprehensive support systems. Furthermore, despite Seattle's progressive stance on social issues, its policies to combat homelessness have sparked controversy. Efforts to expand affordable housing and provide shelters have met resistance from local communities. Meanwhile, debates continue over the role of law enforcement in handling public encampments. Some advocate for stricter policies, while others push for a more humanitarian approach. Seattle's dilemma raises an essential question. Can a city known for its innovation and economic success find a sustainable solution to its deepening homelessness crisis? What role should governments, corporations, and citizens play in bridging this divide? The conversation is ongoing, but one thing is clear: Seattle's contrasts are not just visual, they represent a challenge that demands urgent and innovative solutions. What do you think? Should the city invest more in affordable housing, mental health services, or take an entirely different approach? Number 2. Seattle's homelessness crisis, a history of struggle and survival. Seattle's struggle with homelessness is not a recent phenomenon. The city has weathered multiple economic and social upheavals over the past 2 centuries, each leaving a lasting impact that has contributed to the crisis we see today. The 19th century, the roots of inequality. In the late 1800s, Seattle's first neighborhoods developed around what was called the Skid Road, an area where logs were transported downhill to sawmills. This district, now known as Pioneer Square, quickly became a center for transient laborers, low-income workers, and displaced individuals. Many of these workers were drawn to Seattle by the booming timber and shipping industries, which provided temporary employment but little long-term security. At the time, Seattle was experiencing rapid industrialization, but wealth was concentrated among a small elite who controlled the city's economic growth. For many laborers, wages were low, working conditions were harsh, and job stability was almost non-existent. Seasonal layoffs were common, and there were no social safety nets to support unemployed or injured workers. Those who lost their jobs often had no choice but to live in overcrowded, unsanitary boarding houses or set up makeshift shelters in Skid Road's alleys and docks. Additionally, racial discrimination and social exclusion played a significant role in deepening inequalities. Indigenous communities, displaced by westward expansion and aggressive land policies, were often forced into homelessness or into impoverished reservations. Similarly, newly arrived Chinese immigrants who had come to Seattle to work in railroads and logging camps were subjected to violent racism and restrictive laws that limited their economic opportunities. Many found themselves unable to secure stable housing, further contributing to the city's growing homeless population. As the economy fluctuated with the rise and fall of the timber industry, those living on the margins remained trapped in a cycle of poverty and instability. By the early 20th century, the foundations of homelessness in Seattle had already been established, an issue that would only grow as the city expanded. The 1930s, the Great Depression, and the rise of Hoovervilles. The Great Depression devastated the United States, plunging millions into unemployment and forcing many onto the streets. In Seattle, businesses shuttered, banks collapsed, and families lost their homes overnight. With no government assistance programs in place, those who had lost everything had to fend for themselves. As a result, makeshift settlements known as Hoovervilles, named in disdain for President Herbert Hoover's failure to address the crisis, began to appear across the city. Seattle's largest Hooverville, established in the year 1931, occupied a stretch of land in what is now the Sodo district. Initially consisting of only a few shacks, it quickly expanded to house more than 1,000 people by the year 1934. Residents built their shelters from scavenged wood, sheet metal, and even cardboard, creating a sprawling shantytown that lacked proper sanitation, running water, and medical care. Disease outbreaks were common due to unsanitary conditions, and food scarcity led to widespread malnutrition. Despite these hardships, a sense of community developed within Hooverville. Residents established informal governance systems, self-policing their settlements, and creating rules to maintain some semblance of order. Makeshift markets, communal kitchens, and even small schools emerged, showing the resilience. Police crackdowns and forced evictions became routine, yet Hooverville residents had nowhere else to go. By the late 1939, as economic conditions slightly improved, Seattle authorities made efforts to dismantle Hoovervilles. Many residents were displaced yet again, forced to relocate to even more precarious living situations. Although the settlements disappeared, the systemic issues that led to their creation, job insecurity, lack of affordable housing, and economic inequality persisted, setting the stage for future unemployment crises in the city. The 1970s, the Boeing bust. Seattle's economy was heavily reliant on Boeing, the city's largest employer at the time. However, in the early 1970s, the company experienced a severe downturn due to reduced demand for commercial aircraft. As a result, Boeing laid off nearly 60,000 workers, plunging Seattle into an increase in foreclosures, evictions, and ultimately, homelessness. Entire families found themselves without shelter, as they could no longer afford rising rent prices. The desperation of this era was famously captured by a 1971 billboard near Seattle-Tacoma International Airport that read, "Will the last person leaving Seattle turn out the lights?" This stark message symbolized the mass exodus from the city as economic prospects dimmed. While Boeing eventually recovered, many workers who lost their homes during the crisis struggled to rebuild their lives, and homelessness remained a persistent issue. The 1990s, the 2000s, the tech boom and skyrocketing cost. As the technology industry flourished, led by companies like Microsoft and later Amazon, Seattle transformed into a global hub for high-skilled labor. This economic surge brought prosperity, but also drove housing prices to unprecedented levels. By the early 2000s, the median home price had more than doubled compared to the 1990s, and rental costs surged dramatically. Low-income families found themselves priced out of the city, forced into suburban areas or, for many, into homelessness. Gentrification accelerated as wealthy tech professionals moved in, displacing longtime residents who could no longer afford the cost of living. The stark contrast between luxury high-rises and growing tent encampments became a defining image of Seattle's rapid transformation. A deepening crisis. In the year 2025, Seattle's homelessness crisis remains among the worst in the nation. Over 13,000 people are currently experiencing homelessness in the King County area, with many living in unsheltered conditions. The primary causes include unaffordable housing, the opioid epidemic, and gaps in mental health services. Fentanyl overdoses have surged by more than 50% in the past 5 years, making addiction a major factor in chronic homelessness. Meanwhile, government efforts to construct more shelters and affordable housing have struggled to keep up with demand. Seattle's history makes one thing clear: economic booms and busts, coupled with systemic inequalities, have continuously shaped the city's homelessness crisis. The question remains, will Seattle finally find a sustainable solution, or will history keep repeating itself? Number 3. Seattle today: the scale, causes, and consequences of homelessness. Seattle is facing one of the most severe homelessness crises in the United States, with the issue growing year after year despite ongoing efforts. The contrast between wealth and extreme poverty is stark, making it impossible to ignore. But what exactly is fueling this crisis, and what are its consequences? The scale of the crisis. Seattle has one of the highest homelessness rates per capita in the country. As of the year 2025, more than 13,000 people in King County are experiencing homelessness on any given night. Thousands sleep in temporary shelters, while many more live in tents, cars, or directly on the streets. The city has launched various aid programs, yet the number of people without stable housing continues to rise. The situation raises a critical question: why is a city with so much wealth unable to provide adequate housing for all its residents? Root causes: why is homelessness getting worse? Skyrocketing housing cost. The cost of living in Seattle has surged dramatically in the past decade. Rent prices have increased by nearly 70%, while wages have failed to keep pace. A one-bedroom apartment now averages over $2,000 per month, making housing unaffordable for many low-income workers. The city lacks sufficient affordable housing, leaving thousands struggling to find a place to live. Income inequality and job instability. Seattle's booming technology industry has created a wide economic gap. Highly paid technology employees drive up housing demand, while service workers, who make up a significant part of the workforce, struggle to cover basic expenses. For many, a single unexpected event, such as a job loss or medical emergency, can lead to homelessness. Lack of mental health and addiction services. A significant portion of Seattle's homeless population suffers from mental illness or substance addiction. However, access to treatment remains limited. The opioid crisis has worsened the situation, with fentanyl deaths rising by more than 50% in the past 5 years. Without proper health care and rehabilitation programs, many remain trapped in a cycle of homelessness. Ineffective housing policies. Government policies have failed to keep up with the growing need for affordable housing. Federal cuts to housing assistance programs have made it harder for low-income families to stay in their homes. Additionally, restrictive zoning laws and slow development processes prevent the city from building enough low-cost housing units. The impact: a city struggling to cope. The homelessness crisis affects everyone. Public spaces are increasingly occupied by tent encampments, leading to debates over public safety and sanitation. Businesses and residents express frustration, while those experiencing homelessness face daily struggles for survival. So, what do you think? If you believe Seattle should focus on expanding affordable housing and social services, comment 1. If you think stricter policies and law enforcement should be the solution, comment 0. Number 4. The ripple effect: how homelessness impacts the entire city. The homelessness crisis in Seattle has far-reaching consequences, not only for those experiencing it firsthand, but also for the entire community. As the crisis deepens, the effects become more visible and pressing. Impact on the homeless population. For individuals without stable housing, daily life is a struggle for survival. Without a safe place to sleep, many are exposed to extreme weather conditions, violence, and disease. According to a report from the year 2025, the average life expectancy for an unsheltered person is 28 years shorter than the general population. In King County alone, more than 400 homeless individuals die each year due to exposure, drug overdoses, or untreated medical conditions. The lack of sanitation and healthcare access further exacerbates the problem, making even minor illnesses life-threatening. Beyond physical suffering, homelessness takes a severe toll on mental health. The constant stress of finding food, shelter, and safety leads to high rates of depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder. Without proper intervention, many remain trapped in a cycle of despair, making reintegration into society increasingly difficult. Impact on the community. Seattle's homelessness crisis extends beyond those directly affected. It impacts the entire city. Businesses, especially in downtown areas, report declining foot traffic as concerns about safety and sanitation grow. Storefronts are often surrounded by encampments, making some areas less inviting for customers and tourists. According to local business associations, some small businesses have seen revenue drop by as much as 30% in recent years due to these issues. The financial burden on the city is also staggering. Seattle spends over $1 billion each year on homelessness services, including emergency shelters, healthcare, and law enforcement responses. Hospitals and emergency rooms are overwhelmed with cases involving untreated mental health conditions and substance abuse. Meanwhile, public spaces such as parks and transit stations require constant maintenance and sanitation efforts, adding further strain on city resources. Number 5. Fighting back: solutions and strategies to address homelessness. Recognizing the urgency of the situation, the city has increased its budget for emergency shelters and crisis intervention programs. In the year 2025, Seattle allocated over $200 million to expand temporary shelters and fund outreach teams that provide food, medical aid, and basic necessities to people living on the streets. These efforts aim to prevent further suffering, especially during extreme weather conditions, when the risk of illness and death rises significantly. One of the most effective strategies in combating homelessness is the Housing First model. This initiative focuses on providing stable, permanent housing before addressing other issues like employment, mental health, and substance addiction. Studies show that more than 80% of individuals who receive housing through this program remain housed long-term. By securing a safe place to live first, people are better positioned to seek jobs, access health care, and rebuild their lives. To address the lack of affordable housing, Seattle has expanded its Tiny House Village program. These small, low-cost homes provide individuals with shelter, privacy, and access to essential services such as restrooms, showers, and social workers who help with job placement and housing applications. Currently, the city has 14 tiny house villages, with plans to construct more in the coming years. Additionally, Seattle has established designated safe encampments where people can stay legally while receiving support services, reducing the spread of makeshift tent cities in public spaces. A significant percentage of Seattle's homeless population struggles with mental health conditions or substance addiction. In response, the city has invested in more healthcare services, including mobile clinics that provide on-site medical care and addiction treatment. The number of addiction recovery centers has increased by 30%, allowing more individuals to access detox programs, counseling, and rehabilitation services. These measures aim to break the cycle of homelessness by addressing the root causes that keep people trapped in unstable living conditions. Number 6. The path forward. What can we do to end the crisis? One of the most impactful actions we can take is to advocate for policies that provide long-term solutions. Investing in affordable housing, mental health services, and job training programs can help address the root causes of homelessness rather than just its symptoms. Seattle has already allocated over $1 billion annually to combat homelessness, but smarter policies and better resource distribution are needed to make lasting progress. Many nonprofit organizations in Seattle work tirelessly to support the homeless population. Groups like the Low Income Housing Institute and Mary's Place provide shelter, job assistance, and essential services. Even small contributions, food, clothing, or your time as a volunteer, can have a direct and meaningful impact on someone's life. It is easy to judge people experiencing homelessness, but the reality is that many are victims of circumstances beyond their control. Skyrocketing rent, medical emergencies, job loss, or untreated mental health conditions. Understanding that homelessness is a systemic issue rather than a personal failing can help reduce stigma and foster a more compassionate approach to solving this crisis. Seattle is a city of breathtaking landscapes, innovation, and cultural richness, but it is also a city facing a deep humanitarian crisis. How we choose to address homelessness will define our values as a society. Will we push for change, or will we allow the problem to persist? Seattle is a city of breathtaking landscapes, rich culture, and technological innovation. But beneath its thriving economy and progressive ideals lies a stark reality, one of the most severe homelessness crises in the United States. Through history, economic booms and busts have shaped this issue, yet the challenges persist. Rising housing costs, income inequality, and gaps in mental health services have deepened the divide, making it clear that there is no simple solution. However, change is possible. By investing in long-term solutions, affordable housing, comprehensive social services, and community-driven initiatives, Seattle has the potential to bridge this divide. What do you think? Should cities prioritize housing-first solutions, or should stricter policies be implemented? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to explore more thought-provoking stories from around the world. At NVL Travel Documentary, we uncover the untold narratives shaping our world, one journey at a time. See you in the next adventure.